Water is going up.
Council rates.
Council rates are going up. I mean, we can talk about council rates, but a bit later. But you know, all of these things that add up together, and people are sitting there trying to balance their household budgets, and they're going, you know, and they want to throw a carbon tax on top of this. I mean, it's just not going to work. And now is not the time. They need to. Then, well, there needs to be more debate, and there needs to be more science around it, because at the moment the science is, well, the government is only listening to the science that suits their cause.
It also throws us into an international environment where we lose control of our sovereignty almost. You know, that's the fear. It's not fear, but my big concern is the fact that the big brother will start running Australia, you know, once you start entering into this arena.
Well, and you know, certainly for our exports, if we start putting a carbon tax on exports on top of the mining resources tax, and with a high Aussie dollar as it is at the moment, you know, the resources are what got us through GFC number one. And the government is sitting there, and look, I'm all for the government or the Australian people taking a cut of the resources that are coming out of our ground, effectively, and you know, those profits not going just to the mining companies. But when you stack all that up, and with a high Aussie dollar, you know, we dropped below parity briefly earlier in the week, and now we're back up to $3, $4 again. You know, China, who's the biggest consumer of our resources at the moment, are going to sit there and go, well, hey, not been nice dealing with you, but coal is cheaper in Brazil or South America. Steel I can go and get from there at a much cheaper price. And you know, the last thing we need at the moment is the resources sector to fall over, because that's the thing that's kind of propping us up at a sovereign level and keeping our economy reasonably robust.
Now, Mark, I want to change gears, because I'm actually, I haven't got my razor blades out, but now the good news. The good news, let's start with the fact that if you can turn the TV off, turn the radio off, the sun comes up in the morning, there's some great, in terms of our industry, some great properties out there. The top end's going nuts. There's really great sales there. All your medicos, all of your, a lot of your, you know, powerful sort of business type people, and there's a big sector of people that incomes have not been impacted recently. They are short of properties. They're buying up big properties because I guess it's safe, good place to put your money.
And it's good buying out there at the moment.
Yeah, great buying and opportunities out there. So let's look at someone who's watching this. They've just heard the stuff we're reading in the papers. Now, you and I are both positive guys. We get up in the morning, we get into it. What would you suggest now is some of the really great stuff that's happening?
Look, some of the great stuff that's happening.
This is taking me a while.
No, well,
what about Adelaide?
I'm just thinking which order.
Casino precinct.
Adelaide, yep. I mean, we were there Monday night, and that's just going to be fantastic when
awesome
when that all happens. You know, we've got Roxby happening. We've got the army and that moving down in. We've got air warfare destroyers. There's good things happening in the SA economy that are certainly going to keep things robust into the future. But to bring it down to a more consumer-based level. This is something I will hang my hat on.
That's right, that's good.
Yeah.
That's what we want. We want some statements.
Interest rates are going to come down.
Great. I agree.
Right?
I agree with that.
Absolutely no doubt interest rates are going to come down.
Mind you, Ralph Norris yesterday, Commonwealth Bank, said that the cost of money is going to increase, and he said the rate's going to go up. But their variables dropped 0.1% this week.
Well, yep. I mean, CBA has come out with a no-fee home loan, which they've you know, the fees are a big debate. They've responded to the market and come out with a no-fee home loan. But you know, you look at 3-year fixed rates. 3 weeks ago, they were up around 7.3, 7.4%. You can now get a 3-year fixed rate down at 6.5%.
Yes, so
now,
that's
the banks, you will never win betting against the market on interest rates. So the market will always beat you. And so whilst I'm an advocate of staying variable for that very reason, they're also a very good lead indicator of where rates are heading in the future. So interest rates going down.
Right,
now,
so that's a
statement. Bill Evans came out.
Hang your hat on this?
Yep. Bill Evans, the Westpac economist. You know, it's funny, I was sitting next to him at a lunch about 3 months ago, budget. And he was sort of on the fence at the time, thinking, not sure where interest rates were going to go, but predicting maybe one more, maybe two more small rises over the course of 2011 and early 2012. And he was the first economist to come out and say interest rates are going to drop 1%. Now, there's still economists out there saying interest rates are going to go up, but
you can smell it in the streets.
Every indicator that's out there, the unemployment rate is starting to go up. Job ads are
dropping.
Dropping. They're 49% lower than they were in July 2008.
And I read an article, if you factor in the part-time, it's a much higher rate than that.
Yeah, well, the participation rate is, people, the way they calculate the unemployment rate, if you work 1 hour in a week, then you're classed as employed. And therefore, you might be wanting to work full-time, but you can only get 1 hour waiting tables down at the local
cafe.
You're
out of the list.
You're classed as employed. So the other sleeper issue, and they're certainly starting to report a little bit more of that now, is underemployment. The people who perhaps were full-time now part-time, but want to be full-time because they want the money into their household budgets. So the interest rates coming down, rental yields. I mean, you're probably in a better position to talk about those than me, but certainly I'm seeing rental yields starting to increase.
Yes, they are. Yep.
So
investors are starting to buy in again.
Yep. Now the problem we've got, and we come back to Buffett's great comment: be greedy when others are fearful. Well, the fear is out there now. If people sit there and wait for interest rates to move before they move, the fear's gone out.
Yep.
So you've kind of missed the boat. So I guess the advice would be to, if you can, get in there now. And the banks are wanting to lend. Back in the height of GFC and certainly through 2009, it was more difficult to get a loan than it had been previously. And we sort of joked around in the office, if you had a pulse and a signature, then you could get a loan. And that now they're sort of reading applications.
You're hearing it live. You're hearing it live. Yeah, this isn't admission. We got it on record.
But now they're actually reading application forms. And that's very tongue in cheek. But the fact is that the banks did tighten up on credit criteria, and the reason for that was largely because of cost of funds, and the funding sources were limited. Funding is not so much of an issue now, despite what Ralph Norris has said. And with all this, we come back to the coiled spring of all this cash sitting in the economy, it's going to be looking for places to go.
You can't just leave it there.
So
it needs to be put to work.
I think funding will actually get better for the banks over the next period of time. And so the cost of funds will potentially at least stabilise, maybe even come off a little bit. But certainly in the short term, Ralph may well be right. It's when there's fear in the market, people want greater return because perceived risk is higher. So cost of funds in the short term may be higher. But again, over the longer period, cost of funds will probably come down. Liquidity in the system will improve. And certainly we're seeing right now the banks are very keen to lend. And one of the major banks just got marked down on its in its latest analyst review because their portfolio growth on their book was lower than system. System growth at the moment is about 6%. They were at 4%. So they're looking at alternative strategies to keep their profit.
Out. Yeah.
Even though they just announced a record profit for a bank in Australia.
Which bank was that?
Commonwealth.
We're not picking on the Commonwealth, it's just that they're a big bank.
No, Commonwealth are okay.
They're a great bank.
I think rates will come down. The question is if the Reserve Bank moves in the next couple of months, which, flip the coin as to whether that's going to happen.
But it's happening anyway, isn't it?
Whether the banks will pass on the full benefit of that rate cut.
Right, okay.
Some will, some won't. And as I said, in the short to medium term, cost of funds is still a problem. So we may not see, if the Reserve Bank comes out and drops 0.25% or 25 basis points, then banks may not pass on that full 25 basis points. Or they might do in certain products but not in others. And we'll see competition between the banks. But we've got to remember also, countering that, is competition between the banks is high at the moment because they all want to keep their book growth. So again, be greedy when others are fearful, and to me, the planets are aligning, and you talked about this generational opportunity. I think one of those is now, and whether it's shares, property, whatever asset class floats your boat the most. Now is the time to get in and do something if you can.
So, Mark, just to wrap up our fireside chat, just what would be the 3 things that you would advise members of your family if you're having a dinner party and there were 3 things that you would advise family members to do right now? They've got a mortgage. There's a scenario. They've got a mortgage. They're living in the suburbs. They've got 1.5 jobs. They'd like 2 jobs, so it's a bit tight. What would you do if you were them? What's your advice?
Well, the advice, I guess I'd ask a few more questions, and certainly one of them would be, do they consider their job security to be reasonably good for the near future? And if the answer is yes, then I'd say, well, have you got some equity in your home? If the answer is yes, then the couple of things I'd say is start looking at properties. I'm a big fan of buy land. They're not making any more of it, so I'm a big fan of buying larger blocks that have potential subdivision potential into the future. And if you're into the share market, I'd be looking at some good quality shares that provide good dividend return and have good upside potential for growth. Probably the 2 major things. And the third thing would be, if you've got any cash left over after all of that, after you've paid your electricity bills and everything, is pay down your unsecured debt. Credit card debt, personal loans.
The high cost debt.
Yeah, now is the time to not have consumer debt. Now is the time to have debt for things that are going to grow in value, because we're at, well, some would say rock bottom. And certainly the All Ords index earlier in the week, when it got down to almost 3,800 again, you perhaps could have called rock bottom. We're up about 4,100 now, 4,150. So now is the time to get in. And bearing in mind, in November 2007, when we had the peak of the market at 6,000, and history shows we will rebound to that. And it's just a question of when. And it comes back to the coiled spring. When the market does rebound, you'll see a line going near vertical, just like we saw in the share market recovery on when was it, Tuesday, in the Dow Jones. If you looked at the graph, the line went near vertical as it went up 5% in one day, or in a couple of hours actually. So that would be what I'd be doing with any spare cash.
Great advice, Mark Lewis. As always, fantastic to have a chat with you. And so thank you very much for coming in again.
Thanks for inviting me.
Now, for those of you that have been listening to this, Mark is always good for a view. We don't like people on TOOP TV who don't have an opinion, and I love it when Mark just puts his neck out and says, yep, that's what I reckon is happening. So interest rates are dropping, Mark said, so it's all happening. And look forward to seeing you on the next session we have with you, Mark, here on Fireside Chat. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed the show.